Well, Trent Bray needs to hit the ground running at Oregon State as its new head coach. What exactly are his priorities and in what order?
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights and soon to be mostly team-free. But until then, beloved and loaded Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. We're over 5,000 on YouTube, and I cannot thank you enough. Thousands more on podcasts. You all are absolute rock stars out there. So let's talk about Trent Bray. Trent Bray, the new man at Oregon State, who takes over for Jonathan Smith, who left for Michigan State. Yeah, you know that story right now. Here's what you don't know. Is what is going to be his first major victory or perhaps perceived defeat or letdown as Oregon State's head coach. I think the number one priority for Trent Bray has to be roster retention. So we don't know what Oregon State's schedule is going to be. There have been several clear indications that the schedule is going to have 6 group of 5 teams, 5 Power 5 teams, which will be 4 Power 4 and then Washington State. And that to me is considered Power 5. And 1 FCS team, and that'll make up their 12-game schedule. We haven't seen it yet, but in theory, that's enough to put you into consideration if you have a good enough season for the college football playoff. Now, roster retention is going to be a big thing for Oregon State. The transfer portal officially opens on December 4th. It's unofficially open forever and all the time because apparently tampering, which we'll talk about later in the show, just, it happens. It doesn't matter. The NCAA pretends to care, but they don't actually care. You know what I mean? So I think that that's the number one thing for Trent Bray is making this higher. And he is not particularly highly paid. His starting salary I saw is about $2 million a year, which is significantly less than what Jonathan Smith was making as Oregon State's head coach. So I think what they're going with by making that, a relatively low offer is they're looking at it twofold. Number one, he's a first-time head coach. And number two, if this turns out to be a Zach Garnett at Mississippi State situation, they want to be able to get out of it if possible. I don't anticipate that being the case. I'm just saying I think Oregon State is prepared for every outcome there. They've given him a solid pool of money for his assistants to try and build out the staff, which is one of the priorities I'll talk about here in a moment. But if you're Trent Bray, you're trying to make the best impression possible because I think it's pretty clear that you're not getting a $4 or $5 million a year contract that has got a big, massive buyout or anything like that. There has to be a level of success that is achieved in year one to make Beaver fans feel as they're feeling right now, which is optimistic, upbeat, and positive about what the future can be and what, Trent Bray can bring as the head coach. And so one thing that Oregon State has rightly plugged on social media all over the place has been the reaction from players. And the reaction from players has been really, really strong. And we have seen locker rooms rally around a coordinator when a head coach leaves for another opportunity. You think about Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman had that big video of everyone, mobbing him as the head coach. He hasn't done as well as Brian Kelly, but he has certainly done well as Notre Dame's head coach. Not great, but he has been solid. You think about, I don't know if there was as much social content, I don't remember, but Jake Dicker, right? That situation up at Washington State, in large part, that has gone well for the Cougs. You think about Oregon, Mario Cristobal. There was a hashtag going around that was hashtag CristoBallin. And, that, of course, fizzled out 4 years later when he left for Miami. But there was a movement amongst the players and support amongst the players. And I think that it's really big for Oregon State right now that Trent Bray has made it clear they're going to be able to retain some of the roster. The question is how much? The question is how different is your roster this year compared to next year? Because this year's roster, obviously competitive at the Power 5 level. I fully expect Trent Bray is not going to coach in the bowl game. He's got other priorities. He's got to start looking at 2024 and beyond. I fully expect Oregon State, whoever they get in their bowl game, to be able to go out and win the way they did against Florida last year. Depends on who it is, certainly. There's no doubt about that. But Oregon State could go out and put up a good performance in a bowl game and take some momentum into the offseason there. But roster retention is going to be big to make them as competitive as possible in 2024. He said in his press conference he believes that Oregon State can be a program that makes the college football playoff. I agree with him, by the way. If Oregon State gets to what they've been at their peak, certainly by the end of the year, they're capable of being one of the 12 teams that gets in as, an at-large in all likelihood. Well, not in all likelihood, that's what it would be, because they're not going to be playing in a conference that has at least 8 teams. They can still be a conference, but they can't get an automatic qualifier into the CFP at that time. So roster retention is going to be big, and the number one guy that's going to be at the top of everybody's mindset is Aiden Childs. And the early indications are not fantastic. I think there was a reorganization, shall we say, of Aiden Childs' social media that makes you think, oh man, he could be on the move. And if I'm Jonathan Smith going into Michigan State and I want to establish a new culture, you know what they haven't had in a few years? A good quarterback. You know what Aiden Childs can be? A really good quarterback. And who recruited him there? That'd be Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren more than Trent Bray. And look, if I'm Trent Bray, that's priority number one, is roster retention specifically centered around Aiden Childs. I think DJ Uiagalelei this year did a good job of elevating the quarterback position for the Beavs. I think he showed that in multiple games. I don't think he showed enough to me. Maybe Oregon State fans feel differently, though I doubt it, to make me think, oh yeah, I'd rather, try and compete with DJ next year than, bill Aiden Childs as the true quarterback of the future. No, I'd be all in on Childs. I would be all in. Like, that's got to be priority number one. The good news is Damian Martinez is sticking around. I think a couple of other players have indicated, they want to play for Trent Bray next year as the head coach. And that's great news. But Childs has got to be at the top of your priority list. If you want to compete at the highest possible level next year, yeah, you could compete at a good level with DJ. We saw that this year, right? They're 8-4, and they're a couple plays away from being, 10-2. Like, they could very easily have gone 10-2 this year in a really good Pac-12. That's just not that feasible. I think they're losing to Oregon no matter what. You're not going to win every close game, but between Arizona, Washington State, and Washington, yeah, you could have easily won 2 of those football games, specifically Arizona and Washington. So I think that's priority number one. Priority number two is find an offensive coordinator. When you're a defensive head coach, your most important hire on staff is not your co-defensive coordinator. It's not your recruiting coordinator. It's not your chief of staff. It is your offensive coordinator, because that guy is not just going to be, of course, the play caller and the most important offensive coach in offensive world of football, but he's also going to be your primary offensive recruiter as well. So if you want to get more kids that are of the highest caliber possible, that guy in that hire is going to matter a great deal. I don't have a list of candidates in front of me as to, who could be a potential target there. I mean, maybe Brennan Marion down at UNLV. He's done a really, really good job. That'd be, I think, an outstanding hire if they were able to get him. He's seen as kind of a rising star. He's got some innovative ideas, but I don't think there are any other clear-cut names that you're looking at and going, oh man, it's got to be that guy, or it has to be that guy. I think this is where Trent Bray has got to go, into his Rolodex of contacts and say, okay, who do I know? Who do I want to come and implement an offense? What kind of offense do I want to run? I mean, he was the defense coordinator. Maybe he was looking at what Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren did and is saying, no, we want to be a little bit more shotgun spread oriented while still having maybe some under center concepts. I don't know, but that's something he, as the head coach, does have to figure out. Because I think a common misnomer about college football coaches is, well, if you're a defensive coach, you don't have any say on what's going down offensively. You're not calling the plays, but philosophically, as the head coach, you are involved in those conversations. You're involved in offensive meetings, okay? Take Dan Lanning at Oregon, for example. There are some differences between Will Stein's offense, the OC this year, and Kenny Dillingham's from last year. There are also some things that Oregon does exactly the same. There are a number of plays, concepts, formations that are exactly the same because Lanning knows what he wants to do offensively. He's just delegating the play calling duties, of course, to somebody else. So those, I think, are priorities number one and number two. But there is another. There is another for Trent Bray, and he's got to get this stuff. He's a busy man right now. He's a busy, busy man. eBay Motors is always busy with everything you need. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Mine is so named the Red Rocket. It sits out in the garage, and it is my pride and joy. Keep your ride or die alive, just like I do, at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So priority number 3 for Trent Bray is talking to recruits in 2024. I have these priorities, by the way, listed in order because I think until you can release a schedule and tell recruits what you're going to be doing, there's not a whole lot of sense in pitching them on what you're going to have. Now, he might, hot take here, he's probably got more information and greater clarity on what sort of schedule Oregon State will play in 2024 than I do or than you do. If he's able to relay that information to recruits, that is great. Will some recruits care about, that information being confirmed to be in public? Maybe, but if you can assure them of it and you are 100% certain, then it probably doesn't matter a ton. But Oregon State has never been, a major recruiting power. I think everyone knows that at this point. And I think with, the situation they're dealing with in all this realignment crap, it's going to take a little bit of a hit down, but I don't know that it'll be that significant. I think that's going to depend largely on 2024, which is why I think player retention and getting Aiden Childs back at quarterback, that's going to be a tall order, no doubt. But I think that's why it's got to be the top priority because everyone doesn't really know. How's Oregon State going to be treated in the top 25 polls? How are they going to be viewed in the context of the college football playoff? Can they compete there? Are they playing on TV? Where are they going to play their games? 2024, I think, is going to set the stage, not just for Trent Bray in the eyes of Beaver fans and alumni and donors and the athletic department, but also in the eyes of recruits and how they're going to approach viewing Oregon State University football. Is it, a de facto G5? Is it somewhere in the middle? Is it a good independent? Can they get in the playoff? All that stuff matters. So I think that he does need to go all in for 2024 and not try to, pull the strings and articulate how he's going to build, this is a team that's going to pop in 2026 or we're going to rebuild and start and scrap over. No, I think you have to salvage everything that you can from the roster and try to compete at the highest level possible in 2024 because the perception of your program's already taking a hit in the eyes of the media and fans and recruits and everybody. You got to be able to bolster that as much as you can. And by the way, a victory in the bowl game after 2 consecutive losses to ranked teams, that would mean something there. That would certainly mean something because Oregon State, if they win their bowl game, we don't know what it is yet, is likely going to remain in the top 25. If they end the year 8-5, they could end the year outside the top 25. And that is just not where you want to be right now if you're the Beavs. So I think that's what Trent Bray is looking at right now. It is a difficult, unique situation he's coming into, but I think roster retention, specifically centered around Aiden Childs, has got to be your top priority. Find an offensive coordinator, and then, also fill out the rest of your staff, and then start talking in 2024 recruits. But I think when you do the other 2 things, the recruiting aspect can kind of take care of itself. So if you have questions or anything, I'm always available on Twitter at smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12. DMs and mentions wide open. You can also hop into the YouTube comments. So something I was thinking about, that was just a coincidence that I scratched my head for those watching on YouTube. The old cartoon. What am I doing? What am I doing? Talking about college football, which is like the greatest job in the world. Thank you so much for allowing me to do that, by the way. Without you, there's no show. I'm just talking into a camera and a microphone and nobody's listening, but I like knowing that people are listening and I like knowing you enjoy it. So thank you very much. Washington is number 3 in the final regular season iteration of the college football playoff rankings. If they win against Oregon which they absolutely are capable of, despite being a 9.5-point underdog, they're into the playoff. That is a 100% certainty lock. Nothing else matters. I tweeted out the other day that the Pac-12 winner is going to be in. I think that's true. Here's the caveat I'm going to add. I see a world that can materialize in which Oregon wins and does not make the playoff. I do not see a world, nor do I think there can or should be a world in which Washington wins and does make the playoff. Here's the thing with Oregon, though. Utah not being ranked is absolutely hurting their resume, because what people are holding against the Ducks or making an argument against them is, well, their resume is not as strong. They don't have top 25 wins and they don't have this, that. Now, if they were to beat Washington, they'd add a top 5 win to that resume, bolstering it fairly significantly. But the rest of the resume is not always as strong on paper as it compares to some of the other teams. Now, Utah not being ranked, I find to be utterly ridiculous, because if Tennessee is ranked, Utah should be ranked, and Utah should be ranked ahead of Tennessee. That's neither here nor there. So when I look at what Oregon is dealing with, I think it is far more likely than not that if Oregon wins, they're into the playoff. I don't think it's a guarantee 100% lock. Washington is, Oregon is not, which goes back to, when people say, well, why are we playing these conference championship games and why do they get a second chance? What's the point of playing the first one? This would be the point. This would be the point right here. Washington is guaranteed to get in if they win. Oregon is not, though I think the Ducks should be in if they win, and I think they would be. But here's what could happen. If Bama loses, Oregon will be fine. But if Bama wins, Oregon's got problems. Or Oregon's 100% got problems. Texas is not going to lose to Oklahoma State. I am really confident saying that. I think that number is around like 2 touchdowns. I think Texas is going to cover that number. Oklahoma State stinks, and Texas is good, especially when Quinn Ewers is there. So Texas is winning that game. So Texas will be a 12-1 Big 12 champion. Now, the Big 12 stinks. I mean, it stinks, but Texas is good. I'm not trying to argue that whatsoever. And Texas is the team that it appears most likely could get screwed out of making the college football playoff, and the expansionists will go crazy. And you can ask me those questions if that comes to fruition, but we'll just kind of see how conference championship weekend plays out. So if Texas wins, which they will, and then Bama wins, Bama then has to be ranked ahead of Georgia. They'd both be 12-1. Bama's the SEC champion. Bama wins the head-to-head. They have to be ranked ahead of Georgia, meaning that Georgia has to fall to where? Bama is currently sitting at number 8. Ohio State is in there at 6. You see where I'm going with this? This gets really messy. So if Bama were to win, then Michigan, who's going to beat Iowa 27-0, that's my score prediction, they're going to beat them 27-0. Michigan would be number 1. And then after that, let's say Oregon beats Washington. If Florida State wins, they're going to be in, undefeated Power 5 champion. And then you have 2 spots left. Do you think that committee that keeps putting Tennessee in the top 25 to give the Crimson Tide another quality win, do you think that committee is going to leave out a 12-1 Alabama team? I think what happens is Ohio State would get leapfrogged because they're currently behind Bama and Texas. But once those teams win their conference championship, they have to go ahead of Ohio State. That would put Oregon, at 5 and Texas at 6 and Bama at 7. But if you're dropping Georgia out of the conversation, if you have to put Bama in, you have to put Texas in because Texas beat Bama. And that's the way it should be, by the way. Texas has to remain ahead of Bama as long as they have the same record and Texas holds the head-to-head, which they do. So Auburn really messed this whole thing up because Auburn couldn't get a stop on 4th and goal from the 31-yard line. I mean, my goodness, the Jaden Milroe miracle is keeping this chaos scenario alive. But Oregon is definitely a big fan of Louisville and a big fan of Georgia. I think if either of those teams win, Oregon's got a really good chance to be winning in, because then what you could have is if Bama wins, but Louisville beats Florida State. Florida State will fall. They will crater out of the playoff discussion. And then you could put in Oregon, Texas, and Alabama, leave out Georgia. Again, I think it's more likely than not Oregon is winning in. But Oregon would really like Georgia to win. They would really like Georgia to win. Bama at 12-1. As an Oregon fan, yeah, I don't want to see that. I do not want to see that. Don't want to get into that sort of discussion with the way the Pac has gotten some respect, but not all the respect that it deserves as a league so far this year. So let's talk about Cameron Ward. After we talk about Prize Picks, though, because that's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. It's just that easy. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half, does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go check them out at prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Okay, let's wrap up talking about Cam Ward here. And Brock Heward said, and others have, reported online and whatnot, that that Cameron Ward has gotten multiple offers of $1 million or more. And then Matt Rule over at Nebraska said, to get a good quarterback these days, it costs $1 to $2 million in NIL. He's probably right about that. So Cameron Ward transferred from Incarnate Word a couple of seasons ago to Pullman. He has been real good for the Cougs, not Gardner Minshew good, but he has been a very productive quarterback. He can make some big time throws. He's mobile, quick release, good arm, like NFL caliber guy. I thought he'd be off to the NFL after this year. That doesn't appear to be the case. I don't think that's the worst thing for him because his game can still use a little bit of refinement to increase his draft stock. I think right now he'd probably be, a 4th round or later pick, but I think his ceiling is like a 2nd or 3rd rounder if he really plays well and goes and plays at a big school. He'd be a graduate transfer, so he is eligible to play in 2024, not have to sit out a year, not have to get a waiver or anything like that. So he's going to be a hot commodity. He was the first time in the portal. Jake Dickert was able to get him, and that's been a great, great thing for the Cougs. They've gone 12-12 with him, or 12-13, I guess, with their bowl game last year with him at the helm. There have been inconsistencies in his play, 100%. But when he is on and making big-time throws, he's making big-time NFL-style throws. So it's unfortunate that this is the place we're at in college football where, it's just a straight bidding war. Although at some level, under the table, this is kind of the way it's been. It is definitely exaggerated now with the portal and NIL being legal. I'm not trying to argue that. I think it's just unfortunate that when, a guy like that plays at a school like Washington State, all anyone ever talks about is when's he going to get to a bigger school? How's he going to get there? Who's going to offer him up the most money? So if you're frustrated with that as a college football fan, I know a lot of old school fans that, don't care for the NIL and portal stuff. I get it. I'm not going to tell you to not be annoyed by it because it is different and it changes your viewing experience and it changes how you think about and enjoy the sport. Excuse me a moment. I was that close to coughing straight into the mic and we can't have that. So Ward is going to have a lot of big time offers if he does decide to ultimately stay in college. And look, that's apparently, according to Matt Rule, the going price for a great quarterback is $1 million. Well, that's what it is. And he is capable of being a really big time quarterback. But Any school that gets him, I think should be aware of, the kind of player he is. I think you can watch his highlight reel and go, man, that guy. And by the way, I am a Cam Ward fan, have been for the last couple of years. I've also highlighted regularly on this show that he is an inconsistent player. That is a blatant fact. Now, he was Washington State's entire offense this year. He's a guy who could benefit from having a good run game and having a better offensive line. No doubt about that. But now Washington State, has to go back to the drawing board, and this is certainly a downside of the portal, because I think with the COVID year, he could stay at Washington State another year. That appears really unlikely. And it's just a reflection of the state of college football we're in. The transfer portal hasn't even officially opened yet. And we're talking about all these guys. Riley Leonard is going to enter the portal. And, everyone's talking about him, the Duke quarterback going to Notre Dame. And Will Howard at Kansas State, was a solid player the last couple of years. Helped Kansas State win a Big 12 championship and play in the Sugar Bowl a season ago. He gets beat out by Avery Johnson over the course of this season, and he's in the portal immediately. This is just the world that it is. That's the world we've got now. And if you don't like it, I don't blame you. That's what I wanted to come on here and say. Like, if you look at that situation and go, man, he's going to chase some money and he's going to go to a place and just try and make money and play football and all this sort of stuff. I get it. Here's the upside, though. I understand the downside. I'm going to close with the upside here. Glass half full. NIL has components to it I do not care for. It also has components that I really like and do make the sport better. Why was the Pac-12 so entertaining this year? Why was it the deepest conference in America? Well, because it was the best quarterback conference in America. In a world where Cam Ward is like your fifth best quarterback, that's ridiculously stacked. And that's the way that it was. And so when you look at this league, who came back to the Pac-12 this year? Bo Nix, Michael Penix. Pre-NIL, those guys go pro because they can make money. But now they can make real money at the college level. And how much better was that for those teams? How much better was that for those programs? Yes, it is another reflection of the haves and the have-nots in college football. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about that. It's always been that way at some level. And now that a lot of this stuff is above board, you have Michael Penix playing and you have Bo Nix playing. And those two guys are going to make an epic final conference championship. And guys like Cam Ward, I think normally would have gone to the NFL. I thought he was going to, but guess what? If he can make $1 million playing college football somewhere, boost his NFL draft stock, I think that can be better for the kid. It can be great for some programs. It does go both ways. I'm sure that Cam Ward had NIL opportunities at Washington State that were greater than what other schools were willing and able to offer. And now they're just going to get outbid for him, is the way that it appears. And yeah, that part of it certainly stinks. But I think there is an upside there, which is guys will stay in college longer. At least quarterbacks will. And great quarterback play makes for quality football. That's why the NFL doesn't want people to hit quarterbacks, because they know that when you have bad quarterback play, it's not as fun of a product to watch. And, Cam Ward is a really, really good player. Inconsistent, but really good when he is on. And I think if you gave him, the resources at a place like, in Oregon or Washington, offensive line or another good team that, could be after him, yeah, I think he could be an even better version of himself. I think for a while he was a better version of himself. But, the other side of this too for Washington State, it's not like he came to Pullman for 1 year and bounced. He came in, played for 2 years, put you guys in position to have a great season. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. So, I'm beyond curious to see where he goes, because if you put him in the right spot, yeah, he could have a big, big year. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.